If I could go back in time and talk to my younger self, there are a few things I would say. I would tell myself to stop chasing the approval of people who don't matter, to stop carrying the weight of old grudges, to stop believing that it's too late to start something new. Because the truth is, the things I let go of in my 40s changed everything. And if I had known them earlier, my life would have been completely different. What if you could stop making the same mistakes right now? What if just a few small shifts could make the next decade the best one yet? Let's talk about it. For a long time, I thought I was making careful, responsible choices. I told myself I was weighing the pros and cons, being realistic, avoiding unnecessary risks. But in my 40s, I finally admitted the truth. I wasn't being smart. I was just afraid. Afraid of failing, afraid of looking foolish, afraid of making the wrong move. And because of that fear, I let opportunities slip away. I talked myself out of things I really wanted to do. I stayed in situations that didn't make me happy because at least they were familiar. Then one day I had a conversation that changed everything. A friend was telling me about a job opportunity they were excited about. It wasn't a perfect fit, but they were going to apply anyway, just to see what happened. Without thinking, I blurted out, "What if it doesn't work out?" They laughed and said, "So what? I'll figure something else out." That response stuck with me. It was so simple, but it made me realize how differently we saw the world. I saw every risk as a potential disaster. They saw it as an experience, a lesson, just another step forward. So I started making decisions differently. Instead of asking, "What if this goes wrong?" I started asking, "What if it goes right?" And when fear crept in, I reminded myself that almost every great thing in my life had come from taking a chance. The more I leaned into that mindset, the more my world opened up. I took on new challenges. I said yes to things I once thought were out of my league. I stopped needing certainty before I moved forward. And guess what? Some things didn't work out, but I was okay. Because I finally understood that failure isn't the end of the world. Staying stuck out of fear is. In my younger years, I thought being strong meant pushing through no matter what. I ignored exhaustion. I put other people's needs ahead of my own. I told myself I could rest later, that there were more important things to focus on. But in my 40s, something changed. I started waking up tired, even after a full night's sleep. Small things irritated me more than they should have. I lost patience faster. My body felt heavier, my mind felt foggy, and no amount of coffee could fix it. I kept pushing through, until one day I couldn't. I was sitting in my car after running errands, staring at the steering wheel, completely drained. There was nothing particularly stressful about that day, but I felt like I had nothing left to give. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't normal. I had spent years neglecting myself, thinking it was the responsible thing to do. But what good was I to anyone if I was running on empty? So I made a change. I started listening to my body instead of ignoring it. If I needed rest, I took it, without guilt. If something felt off, I paid attention instead of pushing through. I stopped treating self-care like a luxury and started seeing it as a necessity. And the impact was immediate. I had more energy. I was more present in conversations. I enjoyed things more, instead of just getting through them. I wasn't just existing. I was actually living. Looking back, I wish I had realized this sooner. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's what allows you to show up fully for the things and people that matter most. There was a time when my days felt like a loop. I woke up, handled my responsibilities, checked off my to-do list, and went to bed, only to do it all over again the next day. I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't really living either. I told myself I was just being responsible, doing what needed to be done. But in reality, I was moving through life without thinking. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into years. And suddenly I looked back and realized I couldn't remember the last time I did something just because I wanted to. The wake-up call came in the most unexpected way. One evening, I ran into an old friend I hadn't seen in years. We caught up, and as they talked about their life, places they had traveled, things they had tried, risks they had taken, I felt something I wasn't expecting. Not jealousy, but regret. Not because I wanted their life, but because I couldn't remember the last time I had been that excited about mine. That night, I sat with that feeling, and I asked myself a hard question. If I keep living like this, will I look back one day and wish I had done things differently? The answer was yes. So I made a choice. I stopped coasting. I stopped making decisions based on what was easiest or most convenient. I started asking myself, what do I actually want? At first, it was small changes, taking a different route home, saying yes to invitations I would have normally turned down, trying new foods instead of ordering the same thing every time. Then bigger shifts happened. I picked up old hobbies I had abandoned. I made time for people who inspired me. I took chances on things that felt exciting, even if they scared me a little. And slowly, life felt different. It didn't require a dramatic overhaul. I didn't need to quit my job or move to a new city. I just had to wake up to my own life and start living it with intention. Looking back, I wish I had realized this sooner. Life doesn't slow down. It doesn't pause and wait for us to catch up. We either choose to engage with it, or we let it pass us by. For most of my life, I believed that if I just worked hard enough, planned well enough, and did everything right, I could avoid mistakes. I could always be prepared. I could always make the right choices. I could always be the version of myself that people expected me to be. Without realizing it, I had set impossible standards for myself. I needed to be productive, but not overwhelmed. Healthy, but not obsessive. Successful, but not at the cost of family. A good friend, a good parent, a good partner. All at the same time, without ever letting anyone down. And when I inevitably fell short, I didn't just feel disappointed. I felt like I was failing. It took years before I finally saw the truth. One evening, I was talking to someone I deeply respected, someone who seemed to have everything together. I told them how exhausted I felt, how I never seemed to be doing enough. They just smiled and said, "Who told you that you had to get it all right?" The question stopped me in my tracks, because the answer was, no one. No one had actually told me I had to be perfect. No one had said I needed to handle everything flawlessly. I had created these standards myself. I had placed the weight of always getting it right on my own shoulders. And the worst part? That weight was stopping me from actually enjoying life. So I made a decision. I started letting go of the unrealistic expectations I had placed on myself. I accepted that I wouldn't always have the perfect response, the perfect plan, or the perfect outcome. And I reminded myself that nobody does. At first, it felt uncomfortable. I was so used to measuring my worth by what I accomplished, by how well I performed, by how much I got right. But as I let go, something surprising happened. I became more present. I enjoyed the small moments instead of rushing through them. I started laughing at my own mistakes instead of beating myself up over them. I realized that the people who mattered most didn't expect perfection from me. They just wanted me to show up as I was. And the irony? The more I stopped pressuring myself to be perfect, the better I actually felt. The better I worked, the better my relationships became. I wish I had learned this earlier, because the truth is, life isn't about getting everything right. It's about learning, growing, and giving yourself grace along the way. For years, I told myself I would be happy when I reached the next big milestone, when I had more time, when I felt more secure, when things finally settled down. It always felt like happiness was just around the corner, waiting for me in some future version of my life. But no matter how much I accomplished or how much progress I made, that someday never seemed to arrive. There was always something else to do, another responsibility, another goal, another reason to push happiness just a little further down the road. Then one day I had a conversation that changed everything. I was catching up with an old colleague over coffee. We talked about life, work, and everything in between. And at one point they said something that stopped me in my tracks. They said, "I used to think happiness was something I had to earn." But then I realized I was allowed to enjoy life right now. That hit me hard, because I had been treating happiness like a reward, like something I needed permission to feel. But why? Who decided that I had to wait? Who said I had to accomplish a certain amount before I could simply enjoy my own life? That night, I sat with that thought, and I asked myself a hard question. If nothing in my life changed, could I still find joy in it? At first, I wasn't sure, but then I started paying attention. I noticed the way my coffee smelled in the morning, the way the sun felt on my skin, the way laughter filled the room when I was with people I loved. I started slowing down enough to appreciate the simple things I had been rushing past for years. And little by little, my perspective shifted. I stopped tying happiness to achievement. I stopped believing I had to deserve it. I stopped thinking that life had to be perfect before I could enjoy it. And something unexpected happened. The more I allowed myself to be happy in the present, the more motivation I had for the future. Goals felt exciting instead of exhausting. Responsibilities felt lighter. I started pursuing things because I wanted to, not because I thought they would finally make me feel fulfilled. Looking back, I wish I had realized this sooner. Because life is happening right now. And if we spend all our time waiting for the perfect moment to be happy, we'll wake up one day and realize we waited too long. Looking back, my 40s weren't just another decade. They were a turning point. I stopped letting fear make my decisions. I stopped running on empty. I stopped living life on autopilot. I let go of impossible expectations. And most importantly, I stopped delaying my own happiness. And the result? Life didn't just get better, it felt lighter. I stopped feeling like I was constantly chasing something just out of reach. I started feeling present in my own life. The truth is, we all have things we need to let go of. Beliefs, habits, fears, things that keep us stuck without us even realizing it. So ask yourself, what's holding you back? What's something you keep telling yourself you'll change someday? Because the best thing I learned in my 40s is that someday is just another way of saying never. The real question is, what are you ready to stop doing today?